What's going on, traders? We got a few things to talk about, so let's get straight into it. So today was a really good day for the Bulls. And if you've been following my channel for some time now, you know that my all-time high target for the triple Qs is 510, and for the SPY we're looking at 580, which we've already hit. So congratulations if you followed that. And my next target for the SPY is about 600. However, I don't think we're going to get that target tomorrow or Wednesday. I think if anything, we're going to pretty much get a boring day tomorrow and Wednesday. And the only reason I say that is because we don't get any real news until Thursday and Friday. But not only that, usually when the market rallies or has some huge move to the upside or even to the downside, usually the next day or two you see some type of consolidation or some type of cooling down phase, right? And we gapped up, we hit all-time highs, we hit new highs across the market. So I do imagine that if any day was going to be a cool down phase, it would be the day after, and we'll probably use tomorrow as an opportunity, or even Wednesday as an opportunity to start filling these gaps towards the downside. And so we're looking at the triple Q daily time frame, and as you guys can see, we're pretty much at the supply and demand zone, this daily supply and demand zone. And right here, we had a bullish candle here, and then we had a huge bearish engulfing candle, thus forming our supply and demand zone. And then we ended up retesting the supply and demand zone, so that further confirmed it. And then we rejected it, and we gapped down. And now we're back at this area once again. Not only that, but we're at this trend where we rejected here, we rejected here, we rejected here, and now we're back at this trend all over again. And so you can consider this a rising wedge if you want to. I do understand if you don't, simply because we had this little ugly move right here where bulls pretty much got trapped here. We tried to break out of this area here, and then bears stepped in. But this only shows just how significant this trend is and how strong this trend is, just by showing how strong bears are in this area, or just how strong bears are in this area. It's simple as that. I mean, you see it right here. Every time we hit this trend, we had a huge bearish candle. So huge bearish candle here, nice bearish candle here, and then you had another one here. So I can only imagine that if we were to get any type of movement tomorrow or Wednesday, I think we will use that opportunity to really fill these gaps towards the downside. And it's not much. I mean, we're looking at a move towards 494.3, 493 range, so that's really not much in regards to downside. But if we just continue to break further down, which is very much possible, but remember, I tell you guys all the time, gaps have very strong support and resistance. But if we just so happen to break down for whatever reason, like really break down and just ignore this whole gap area or gap support, and we start to really break down, then I imagine that we're going to start heading towards about 480. I'm not counting on that happening, but it's very much possible. So just keep an eye on things, and just be very careful heading into tomorrow and Wednesday. Again, I still think we're going to see more upside. I just don't think it's going to happen at least tomorrow. All right, I think tomorrow is going to be the day where we see some type of rejection towards the downside and start filling these gaps to the downside before we start heading towards all-time highs or newer highs all over again. So really pay attention to this. Now, if we do continue to break further down, thus confirming this rising wedge, and we break out of this rising wedge, then we can easily start heading towards that 460 target and just really mitigate this fair value gap. I'm not counting on that to happen. I don't think that's going to happen until probably towards the end of October, so sometime after this week. I do imagine that that's when we're going to start seeing a lot of bearish moves to the downside. But it all depends on how the end of this week turns out. If we see those all-time high targets towards the end of this week, which is 510 on the triple Qs and like 600 on the SPY, then I imagine that at some point we're going to start seeing some huge rejection towards the downside. But again, we'll see. I could be wrong. It's just a waiting game at this point. We look at the SPY. So we look at the SPY daily time frame, and SPY is in a very interesting spot as well. As you guys can see, we have this rising wedge, but we're currently breaking out of this rising wedge. And we talked about this in another video. I believe it was the last video where I said this can be another situation where we're setting up for a bull trap. Now, again, I think the SPY is going to see a lot more upside. My next target from here is about 595. That's just me lowballing it. My highest target is 600, but I don't think we're going to see that 600 target easily. I think it's going to be a pretty annoying move. So I would say, if anything, if you're counting on a move to the upside in regards to the SPY or all-time high or a new high target for the SPY, I would say 595 will be a much safer much more safe option. All right, so as you guys can see here, we rejected here, we rejected in this area here, we rejected, and then we're currently just breaking out of this area. We bounced here, we bounced here, and then we attempted to break further down here, but then we just immediately bounced back up. So bulls have been stepping in every single time. So I would be really careful in this area here, especially considering where the triple Qs are. This can easily be a bull trap right here, where you can just, because again, look where the triple Qs are. Whoa. All right, so look where the triple Qs are. The triple Qs is at a wall right now, but then you have the SPY breaking out. So I would be very careful. This can easily, and I mean easily, be a bull trap. I mean, it just seems too obvious. Maybe I'm wrong, but again, I think if we were going to use an opportunity to cool down, and if we are going to use that opportunity to cool down, I imagine we're going to start filling these gaps towards the downside on the SPY and the triple Qs. We look at the NQ. And so the NQ, I mean, essentially the same as the triple Qs. You're looking at the same type of scenario here. Again, I mean, it's crazy just how identical they are. You have a bullish candle, and then you have a bearish engulfing candle. You retest it, and then you broke down all over again. So I mean, the same exact move, the same exact setup. So you guys know I'm not making up. You rejected here, you rejected here, you rejected here, and then you are at the supply and demand zone. You haven't quite hit the trend. I do think the NQ has a potentially more upside towards 20,800 before we possibly see a rejection, and I think that would be a perfect opportunity to pretty much trap bulls. So tomorrow, I'll be very careful. If tomorrow opens very bullish, or not very bullish, but if tomorrow opens bullish, I would just be careful at around 20,800 on the NQ, and we could possibly look at some type of rejection there. But other than that, I mean, we still have gaps to the downside that needs to be filled as well, and then we have fair value gaps to the downside as well. So I'll be very careful in regards to the overall market, especially the SPY and NQ. I mean, we still have this gap all the way down here at around 19,500. So at some point in time, a huge drop is going to come. It's just a matter of when, and I'm pretty much betting on the end of October. So we'll see. But other than that, that's what I'm looking at for the NQ. You also have this rising wedge pattern as well playing out. This is much more clean. I mean, you rejected here, you rejected here, bounce, bounce, so on and so forth. And then you have these fair value gaps that need to be mitigated to the downside. And this is the 4-hour time frame, by the way. You look at the ES, and the ES is, again, this is why I say be careful with the SPY, because look where ES is. We're looking at the 4-hour time frame. You rejected here, you rejected here, you rejected here, and now you're at the top of this trend, right? And so if someone's looking at the SPY, because a lot of traders don't look at the futures, they just prefer the ETFs, but I think it's a much smarter option to look at both, because one can tell you, or both can tell you, if there's a trap about to happen. And so if the SPY is pretty much breaking above this range right here, or breaking above, I would say this rising wedge right here, and you see it breaking out here, but then you look at the ES, and the ES is at a wall, I mean, that spells signs for disaster, right? You can be looking at a trap. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But again, I mean, look where we are. We rejected here, we rejected here. I mean, and now we're back up here again, and we're pretty much at a wall right now. We have a little bit more upside, granted, but I would just be very careful in this area right here in regards to SPY. So if you're one of those traders that just only look at the ETFs, I highly recommend you start looking at the futures as well, because situations like this, where you have the ES hitting a wall, but then you have the SPY telling you a whole different story, can be very vital to how you trade, right? And so that's why I think that there is a possible bull trap heading into tomorrow. If we do see upside in the morning, I would just be very careful. Now, again, I just want to make this clear. Even if we do get a bull trap, I don't think it's the end all be all. I still think we're going to see more highs sometime this week. I think probably Thursday or Friday we'll probably complete a lot of this move to the upside, and then we'll probably start preparing for downside in the near future. But we'll see. All right, and that's what I'm looking at for the ES. So just be very careful here for the ES. 5,900. It's only a matter of time before we see 6,000. We possibly could look at a move like this, where we pretty much reject from up here, mitigate this fair value gap. It's not much to the downside, honestly, and then we start doing this. We start heading higher all over again, right? But be careful. That's my point. Be careful heading into tomorrow. All right. Don't be surprised if you do see a drop. And so that's what I'm looking at for the futures and ETFs. And so we look at Bitcoin. And so I said this in the Discord last night. I said Bitcoin looks like it wants to break out, and that's exactly what it did. It broke out, and I don't think Bitcoin is going to make new highs. I will make that clear. I don't think Bitcoin is going to make new highs. I could be wrong, and by new highs I mean like 75k. Okay, so right now, if we map out Bitcoin, that's the wrong one. And so right now, if we map out Bitcoin, let's actually go to the daily time frame. We're pretty much at a wall here as well. So it's very interesting where we are. You guys see we rejected here, and now we're back at this area here all over again. You bounced here, so Bitcoin is sloppy, but you know you can pretty much see the levels if you're experienced, right? And so you rejected here, and now we're back at this area here. We made a huge move to the upside with like hardly any cool down. So I do think there is going to be again a cool down phase between tomorrow and Wednesday where we see one of these moves. Bitcoin pretty much retest between 65k, 63k before we start heading higher and doing it all over again. Very interesting here. I mean it's super clean double bottom. I mean you couldn't miss this at all. It's very clean double bottom right here as well. You broke the neckline, so if anything, you either retest the neckline around 65, between 65 64k, or you start heading towards 63k, and then you start to head higher from there. It was also what's also interesting is that our bot in our Discord alerted coin calls, 200 calls. This was October 1st, and this was when coin was all the way at around 160, right? So October 1st, right? And again, this was when coin was at 160, and so our bot in the Discord AI bot alerted a 200 strike call for October 18th, which is this week, right? 69% confidence, 700k premium, and then you have your volume and open interest. So this, and now look where coin is. I mean, it's insane. Look where coin is right now. I mean, it's pretty much almost at 200. And so I do think coin is going to head higher, a little bit higher towards about 205 to 10 range. We traded it. We made a good profit off of it, but I think it has a little bit more upside. It's actually at 199.9 after hours. So yeah, congratulations if you played coin at all. But yeah, if you want access to our Discord bot, I mean it doesn't just alert random things, it alerts what the whales are doing, what big money is doing. If you want access to these type of trades where it's calling things where coin is all the way at 160 and runs $40 to the upside, I mean, you could have made a big bag off of that. So if you want access to this, Discord link is in the description below, or plays like this. It's also important to note that, well, we'll get into that in a bit. Let's not get too far ahead. But again, Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin has a little bit more upside. I just don't think it's going to happen right away. Maybe a little bit, maybe towards 67k, 68k tops before we see some type of cool down. So again, be careful heading into tomorrow. We're at a wall in a lot of areas here. Okay, just to be clear. I mean, you saw it on triple Qs, you saw it on the SPY, NQES. We're at walls right now, and so we look at Apple, right? And so Apple is in a very interesting spot as well. I mean, Apple is pretty much at this trend. It is rejected here, rejected here, rejected here. I don't know if you guys can see these wicks, but there are wicks here. So you guys know I'm not just making these levels up or anything like that. And then you are currently back at this area here as well. So Apple can break out from this area towards about 235, 240. And the only reason I say that is because these bulls right here are probably going to carry it much higher. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Nvidia starts to drop tomorrow and Apple like pretty much takes its place. I wouldn't be surprised that happens. That's usually how it goes. You see Apple pretty much drop, and then you see Nvidia take over, and then you see the exact opposite happen as well. So pretty annoying. Other than that, Apple above 230, pretty bullish. I have nothing else to say about it. It rejected here, it rejected here, rejected here. It's trying to break higher from here. So just keep an eye out on Apple for more upside. The Russell. So we look at the Russell IWM. And again, like I said before, a lot of stocks, a lot of ETFs, a lot of futures are at these walls right now. You rejected here, you rejected this area here, now you're back at this trend right here. What's very interesting, we go to unusual wells, on the IWM, there's a lot of puts coming in for IWM. There's been a lot of puts coming in all week for IWM and Russell. The only issue is that the market continues to go higher and it's pretty much holding IWM hostage. And so I was showing this to our Discord. The whales are trading a lot of puts for IWM in November, and so you have 217 puts for November 1st. You have 226 calls for November 15th. But what's interesting about these calls is that they're above the bid. Um, they're above the bid right now, and then you have more bears in these calls than bulls. You have 3,584. Actually, let me yeah. So you have 3,584 bears in this bearish volume in this contract right now. So I know you guys can't see that part of it, but it's there. All right, it's about 70% bears in that contract, and so that's only telling me that they aren't, whatever whale is trading this, they're not expecting IWM to go higher than 226. You have 211 puts for November 15th as well. Very interesting play above the ask. This is actually, yeah, here it is. So above the ask, you have 64,807 ask, and then you have 7,000 bid, and then you have 90% bearish value in this contract. So these whales are really expecting IWM to drop, and I think it's going to happen. I mean, if it's going to happen, like I said, it's going to happen towards the end of October, probably November, all right before elections. So definitely something to pay attention to. I mean, even I believe last week as well, you had a lot of bearish value. Again, November 15th, you have 209 puts coming in, you have 207 puts, you have 222 calls coming in, or that came in for October 25th, and IWM is currently cashing that out. But yeah, so the whales are really bearish on IWM right now. So something's coming. I just don't know what, but something's definitely coming. It's just IWM cannot. It doesn't really move without the market, and once the market drops, this thing is really going to cash out. Those plays are going to cash out, so we'll see. But yeah, that's what I have for the Russell. It's at a wall right now. Again, if we're going to cool off tomorrow or even Wednesday, then I expect a drop towards about 220 to between 220 to 18 on the Russell, and then we'll have to see what happens from there. But that's really all I have for the Russell. And so we can look at Nvidia. Actually, let's look at the semiconductor ETFs. And so what's interesting about the semiconductor ETFs, we talked about this before, is these fair value gaps that need to be mitigated to the upside. Now, I don't have my settings for there's a fair value. Wait, hold on. Is it? Yeah, there's a fair value gap up here. I had changed my settings a bit, so it's not appearing, but there's definitely one up here. But regardless, if you believe that or not, there is a gap right here that needs to be filled. I believe once SMH fills this gap towards 270, I think that's when the market is most likely going to be topped out. That's just my opinion. We'll see, but once this gap is filled on SMH, and even here, I mean, we zoom out again. We're on a daily time frame. We bounced here. We bounced here. We bounced here. We rejected here, and now we're heading back towards this trend. And so once we hit this trend, I think we're either going to break through it and actually respect this gap resistance and maybe just save this for later, whatever the case may be. Because again, if I'm not having high expectations for tomorrow and Wednesday, right? So maybe we see a little more upside here, and then maybe just start to maybe create room, maybe have a huge drop to the upside, create more room for upside, and then we start heading towards this gap. And so I think that is the likely move. So if we are going to drop, I will watch for a retest at about 257, 255 range on SMH, and then that will create a lot more room for us to start heading towards this gap and filling this gap at 270. Once that's filled, I think that's when we're done. We look at SOXX. And so SOXX pretty much in the same area. Again, it's really close to a wall right now. I told you guys that 250 is one of my targets for SOXX, but right now we're pretty much heading towards this gap fill. We're pretty much almost there. There's a gap that needs to be filled at around 242, 241. So all signs are pointing towards a cool down or a drop between tomorrow and Wednesday. So I wouldn't be, unless news just drops out of nowhere, I wouldn't be too excited for upside right away. I think tomorrow, again, is just going to be an opportunity for us to just pretty much cool down. We still have a little more room to the upside, of course, so tomorrow morning can absolutely be bullish. We'll see a little more upside, but then after that, it'll probably just be a boring rest of the day, and then boring Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday. I expect things to pick back up. Nvidia, and so Nvidia, and so in our bot in the Discord has been going. Whales are going insane on Nvidia. They have been trading the crap out of Nvidia. This is very interesting though. There's a put order for Nvidia 120, but that's all the way till the end of next year. But you have 138 calls, 135 calls, you have 140 calls, October 25th. So Nvidia, I think it's obvious that Nvidia is going to see a move towards 140. I don't think anyone's doubting that. Highest I'm looking at is about 150 on Nvidia, but as you guys can see, I mean, Nvidia has been there's a lot of calls for MSTR as well. Someone pointed out in the Discord as well. So yeah, a lot of calls for MSTR, a lot of calls for Meta, a lot of this is puts for SOXL. But again, Nvidia has been getting a lot of call volume. I mean, you have 146 strike for November 18th here. You have 165 calls for March 21st, 2025. And then you have 200 calls. Someone played it safe here, but that's for like 2026. But Nvidia has just been getting a lot of attention. 142 calls, 144 calls, 143 calls. The whales have been going ballistic with Nvidia, so something to really pay attention to. I have no doubts. I mean there's plenty of space for more upside here for Nvidia to head towards 145. From there we'll see what happens, but again, there is a gap to the downside, so if we are going to cool down tomorrow, I think Nvidia is going to see at least 135. And then, I mean, we have a lot of gaps to the downside in regards to Nvidia, honestly. Are they going to get filled like right away? Probably not, but I would just be very careful after this week. Be very careful after this week. But we still have more room to the upside in regards to 145. As you guys can see in the Discord, whales are going ballistic. They're trading the crap out of this thing. So definitely something to pay attention to in regards to Nvidia. I do expect more upside. Highest I'm looking at is about minimum I'm looking at 150. Highest I'm looking at is about 160 on Nvidia. And that is pretty much all I have for this video. Hopefully you guys got something out of it. Overall, still pretty bullish on the market. I think we're going to see a lot more upside. My target still remains the same, 510, 600 on the SPY. We hit our first target on 580 on the SPY. Now I'm looking towards about 595, 600, and then 510 on the triple Qs. Minimum, I guess, 505. What's also interesting is that, well, I'm not going to waste your time and look for it. It's going to take forever. But regardless, Discord link is in the description below. Hopefully you guys got something out of this video. Any questions, or maybe you disagree with something I said, maybe I missed something, feel free to comment below. And if you do agree, let me know below as well. Until the next video, traders, you have a good one.